The arrival. The ancient monitoring station floated in the void between stars, a silent witness to 300 years of warfare. Inside its crystalline halls, observer Krell 9 watched the endless dance of destruction through sensors that could taste the radiation of dying ships from 1,000 light-years away. The Serpentis war zone had become a graveyard of ambitions, where three mighty civilizations ground each other into cosmic dust over resources that might not even exist anymore. Krell's 6 eyes, arranged in a perfect circle around his elongated head, suddenly contracted in unison. Something new had appeared on the sensors, not from any of the established jump gates or known travel corridors. It simply emerged from the darkness between stars, moving with a purpose that sent ripples through subspace itself. The warning systems activated automatically, filling the station with harmonious tones that would have been beautiful if they didn't herald potential catastrophe. Krell's apprentice, a young Vorthon named Syl, rushed to the observation deck, her translucent wings fluttering with anxiety. "Master Krell, what triggers the deep warning? We haven't heard these tones since the Great Convergence 50 cycles ago." Krell gestured toward the holographic display with one of his 4 arms, while the others danced across control interfaces. "A single vessel has entered the Serpentis zone. Unknown configuration. Unknown origin. But the energy signature..." He paused, his voice dropping to barely a whisper. "The energy signature suggests technology we have not cataloged in our entire database." The hologram zoomed in, revealing a ship that seemed almost primitive in its simplicity. Where the Zalathi Empire's vessels were Baroque masterpieces of curves and spires, where the Mechanist Collective's ships were perfect geometric shapes that hurt to perceive directly, and where the Stormbringer's craft were living nebulae contained in electromagnetic bottles, this new arrival was almost insultingly basic. A long, angular hull of some dark metal, with clean lines and practical protrusions that suggested function over form. Syl studied the readings, her youth making her bold where Krell was cautious. Perhaps it's a lost colony ship, or traders who took a wrong turn. The power readings are significant, but the design looks almost primitive. Krell's eyes rotated independently, a sign of deep thought among his species. "That is what concerns me most, young one. In my experience, the most dangerous predators often wear the plainest masks." He adjusted the sensors, pulling in more data. "The ship is broadcasting something. A message on multiple frequencies, even some we considered obsolete." The speakers throughout the station came alive with a voice that neither of them had heard before. It spoke in Galactic Standard, but with an accent that suggested the speaker had learned it from books rather than conversation. The voice was calm, measured, and carried an undertone of absolute certainty that made Krell's scales shift uneasily. "This is Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran Union vessel Perseverance. We are entering this region in response to automated distress signals detected by our deep space monitoring systems. We come in peace, but we are prepared for war. Any hostile action against civilian vessels in our presence will be met with appropriate response." Message repeats. Syl's wings stopped moving entirely, a sign of shock among her people. "Terran? Master, I've never heard of such a species. Have you?" Krell was already searching through the archives, his fingers moving with the speed of centuries of practice. "Here. A minor notation from 200 cycles ago. A probe from the Zalathi Empire discovered a small system on the galaxy's edge. Single habitable planet. Carbon-based lifeforms showing early industrial development. The probe marked them as Class 3 pre-space, not expected to achieve faster-than-light travel for at least another 1,000 cycles. The planet was designated for observation only, no contact authorized. But that would mean..." Syl's voice trailed off as the implications hit her. "Yes," Krell confirmed, his voice heavy with the weight of what they were witnessing. "If this ship is truly from that world, then these humans have achieved in 200 cycles what most civilizations require millennia to accomplish. Either they are the most rapidly advancing species in recorded history, or they had help," Syl finished. "Or they were never as primitive as the probe believed," Krell countered. He expanded the sensor net, and what he saw made all 6 of his eyes dilate fully. "Young one, observe the war zone. Look at what's happening." The 3 great fleets that had been locked in their eternal dance of death for centuries were moving. The Zalathi Empire's Golden Armada, 500 ships strong, each one a work of art that could crack continents, began shifting their formation. The Mechanist Collective's perfectly synchronized fleet of 300 vessels, each one linked in a hive mind of pure logic and calculated destruction, rotated as one toward the new arrival. The Stormbringers, chaotic and wild, their 200 ships like bottled hurricanes swirled toward the single human vessel. "They're all moving to intercept," Syl breathed. "The human ship will be annihilated. Should we warn them?" Krell was about to respond when another sensor triggered. This one was deep in the war zone itself, in a region where no sane being would venture. A civilian transport, old and failing, broadcasting a weak distress signal that had been repeating for days. The ship's manifest showed over 300 souls aboard, families, children, refugees from a world that no longer existed. "Master, the human ship is changing course. They're heading directly for the distress signal, through the storm of 3 converging fleets." Krell's disbelief was evident. "That's not brave, it's suicidal." The communication channels erupted with activity. The Zalathi fleet commander, Regent Zoxian the Gilded, his voice dripping with the arrogance of 1,000 conquered worlds, broadcast on all frequencies. "Unknown vessel, you enter the Serpentis zone without permission. This region belongs to those strong enough to hold it. Withdraw immediately or be scattered to atoms." The Mechanist Collective spoke with the voice of 1,000,000 minds thinking as one, their words precise and emotionless. "Terran vessel, probability of your survival if you proceed, 0.003%. Logic dictates immediate withdrawal. Continued advance will result in termination." The Stormbringers didn't bother with words. Their message was a psychic scream that could be felt rather than heard, a promise of chaos and destruction that had broken lesser minds. The human captain responded immediately, his voice unchanged as if he hadn't just been threatened by enough firepower to sterilize a dozen worlds. "This is Captain Chen. I acknowledge your warnings and choose to proceed. There are civilians in distress. They will be rescued. Any interference with this humanitarian mission will be considered an act of war against the Terran Union and all of humanity." "You have been warned in return," Syl gasped. "Master, did he just threaten 3 entire civilizations? With one ship?" Krell's scales had shifted to a color Syl had never seen before, something between awe and terror. "Not threatened, young one." He stated a fact. "There's a difference. Watch the human ship's energy readings. The sensors showed something impossible. The human vessel's power output was increasing, but not in any way they understood. It wasn't drawing from fusion reactors or antimatter cores, or even the exotic dark energy that the Stormbringers used. It was as if the ship was breathing, drawing in something from space itself, something that had always been there but that no one had thought to use. Regent Zoxian's golden flagship, Pride of Zalath, moved to block the human vessel's path. The ship was a masterpiece, 3 kilometers of artistic warfare, its weapon systems alone worth the GDP of entire star systems. Beside it, the human ship looked like a child's toy, barely 500 meters long. The Regent's voice boomed across all channels again. "Observe, primitive ones, the price of defiance." The Pride of Zalath fired. Not a warning shot, but a full alpha strike. Beams of coherent light that could pierce moons. Projectiles accelerated to percentages of light speed. Exotic particles that unraveled molecular bonds. It was an attack that had ended entire fleets. The human ship didn't dodge. It didn't raise shields in any conventional sense. Instead, space around it seemed to hiccup. The attack simply ceased to exist at a certain distance from the hull, as if they had entered a region where the laws of physics had been politely asked to step aside. Captain Chen's voice returned, still calm, still certain. "That was your one free shot, Regent. There won't be a second. We are proceeding to the civilians." "Stand aside, Master," Syl whispered, her wings trembling. "What are they?" Krell watched as the human ship continued forward, ignoring the massive fleets converging on it like antibodies attacking an infection. His 6 eyes focused on different aspects of the sensor data, trying to understand what he was seeing. A species that had been barely industrial 200 cycles ago, now demonstrating technology that made the galaxy's most advanced civilizations look like children with sticks. "I think, young one, we are witnessing the arrival of something unprecedented." The humans didn't just develop space travel. They developed it while surrounded by examples of what not to do. They watched us from afar, learned from our mistakes, and built something entirely different. The communication channels exploded with activity as all 3 fleets demanded answers, made threats, promised destruction. The human ship sailed on, serene and untouchable, toward the dying civilian transport. And in that moment, Krell understood something that would soon shock the entire galaxy. The humans hadn't entered the war zone because they were brave or foolish. They had entered because, to them, it wasn't a war zone at all. It was simply a place where people needed help, and they had the means to provide it. The three mighty fleets, with all their power and pride, were just obstacles to be brushed aside if they got in the way. The galaxy had known war for millennia, but it had never known humans. The Reckoning. The first coordinated attack came exactly 17 minutes after the human ship had shrugged off the pride of Zalath's Alpha Strike. All three fleets, despite their centuries of warfare against each other, recognized a greater threat when they saw one. Or at least what they perceived as a threat. Captain Marcus Chen stood on the bridge of the Perseverance, watching the tactical display with the detached interest of a man studying a chess problem he had already solved. Commander Sarah Walsh, his executive officer, stood beside him, her fingers dancing over a holographic interface that looked deceptively simple. "Captain, I'm counting over 1,000 attack vectors. They're using everything. Energy weapons, kinetic rounds, exotic particles, even some kind of probability manipulation field from the Mechanist Collective." Chen nodded slowly. "And the Meridian Protocol? Ready on your command, sir. But I should remind you, we've never tested it against this level of concentrated fire." Chen smiled slightly, the first emotion he had shown since entering the war zone. "Sarah, we've never tested it at all outside of simulations. Today seems like a good day to learn something new." The space around the Perseverance erupted into a maelstrom of destruction. The Zalathi Empire's golden beams carved through space in perfect artistic patterns, each one calculated to be both beautiful and lethal. The Mechanist Collective's attacks came in mathematically perfect sequences, designed to overwhelm any possible defense through sheer computational superiority. The Stormbringer's chaotic assault was perhaps the most dangerous, weapons that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously, impossible to predict or counter through conventional means. Chen spoke a single word: execute. What happened next would be debated by military theorists for generations. The Perseverance didn't deploy shields or armor or any kind of defensive system that the galaxy recognized. Instead, it reached out with invisible hands and grabbed hold of space-time itself. The ship existed, then it didn't. Then it existed in 1,000 places at once, then nowhere, then exactly where it had been all along. From the perspective of the attacking fleets, their weapons struck home perfectly. Every single shot hit the human ship. The only problem was that the human ship wasn't there when they arrived. It hadn't moved. Movement implied traveling from one point to another. Instead, the Perseverance had simply convinced the universe that it had always been somewhere else. On the observation station, Krell and Syl watched in stunned silence as their sensors tried and failed to make sense of what they were seeing. The readings were contradictory, impossible, suggesting that the human ship was simultaneously destroyed and intact, present and absent, real and theoretical. "Master," Syl's voice was barely above a whisper. "They're using quantum superposition as a defense mechanism. But at that scale, the energy requirements would be infinite using our understanding of physics," Krell finished. "Which means our understanding is wrong." The Mechanist Collective, being purely logical beings, were the first to recognize the futility of their attack. Their unified voice echoed across the communication channels. "Analysis complete. Human vessel employs technology beyond current comprehension. Probability of successful engagement revised to 0. Recommend immediate cessation of hostilities." Regent Zoxian's response was predictable and volcanic. "Cowards, machine minds without courage. The Zalathi Empire does not yield to tricks and illusions." But even as he spoke, his tactical officers were reporting the impossible. Every weapon they fired was hitting empty space, while the human ship continued its steady progress toward the civilian transport. More disturbing, their energy readings suggested that the Perseverance was actually gaining power from their attacks, somehow converting the incoming destruction into fuel for whatever impossible technology it was using. The Stormbringers, chaotic as always, decided to try a different approach. Their ships began to phase in and out of reality, attempting to match the humans' quantum manipulation with their own dimensional shifting. It was like watching thunderclouds try to catch smoke. Captain Chen's voice cut through the chaos, still infuriatingly calm. "All fleets, this is your final warning. Cease fire immediately. We are beginning rescue operations. Any further interference will be met with decisive action." Regent Zoxian, his pride wounded beyond measure, screamed his response. You dare threaten the Zalathi Empire with one ship? We are the inheritors of 1,000 suns. We have conquered entire sectors. You are nothing but upstart primitives who have stolen technology you don't understand. Chen sighed, the sound carrying clearly over the communications channel. Computer, implement Sunshine Protocol, non-lethal configuration. Let's show them why humanity named their ships after concepts rather than boasts. The Perseverance pulsed once. It was a gentle thing, almost beautiful, like watching a star take its first breath. The pulse expanded outward at the speed of thought, washing over the assembled fleets. And as it passed every single ship, all 1,000-plus vessels of 3 mighty civilizations found themselves suddenly powerless. Not destroyed. Not damaged, simply switched off. Engines died. Weapons went cold. Shields flickered and faded. Life support continued functioning. The humans had been very specific about that, but nothing else responded. The greatest armadas in the known galaxy hung helpless in space like toys whose batteries had been removed. The panic that followed was absolute. Thousands of voices screamed across communication channels demanding answers, pleading for systems to restart, threatening consequences that they no longer had the power to enforce. Through it all, the Perseverance continued toward the civilian transport, as serene as a whale swimming through a school of paralyzed fish. On the observation station, Krell had stopped trying to understand what he was seeing and had simply accepted it. The humans haven't just advanced quickly, he told Syl. They've advanced differently. While we were perfecting bigger weapons and stronger shields, they were learning to rewrite the rules that make weapons and shields necessary. The rescue operation itself was almost anticlimactic. The Perseverance extended what looked like tendrils of solid light, wrapping gently around the failing civilian transport. In moments, the refugee ship was engulfed in a golden glow that seemed to repair and revitalize it at a molecular level. Life support systems that had been failing for days suddenly hummed with perfect efficiency. Hull breaches sealed themselves. Engines that had been cold and dead purred back to life. Captain Chen's voice addressed the rescued ship directly. Civilian transport, this is the Perseverance. Your ship has been repaired and upgraded. You should have sufficient supplies and fuel to reach any safe harbor you choose. We've also installed a quantum beacon. If you're ever in distress again, activate it. Someone will come. The captain of the civilian transport, a aged Vorthan whose voice cracked with emotion, responded. But, why, we're not your species. We're not even from your sector of space. Why would you risk everything for strangers? There was a pause before Chen answered, and when he did, his words carried the weight of humanity's entire philosophy. Because we remember what it's like to be alone in the dark. We remember looking up at the stars and wondering if anyone would come if we called for help. We decided that when we gained the power to be that someone, we would be. Every time. Without question. Without reservation. The 3 paralyzed fleets listened to this exchange in stunned silence. These humans had just neutralized over 1,000 warships without firing a single destructive shot, and their primary concern was still the welfare of civilians they had never met. The Mechanist Collective was the first to understand the implications. Their unified voice was different now, tinged with something that might have been respect. Query: will you restore our system's functionality? Chen's response was immediate, of course. In approximately 10 minutes, all systems will return to normal operation. We'd do it sooner, but we want to ensure the civilian transport is safely clear of the area first. I would strongly suggest that when your weapons come back online, you remember that we could have left them permanently disabled, or worse. Regent Zoxian, his pride warring with pragmatism, managed to ask the question that everyone was thinking. What are you, really? The report said humans were primitive, pre-space. This technology, it should have taken you millennia to develop. This time it was Commander Walsh who answered, her voice carrying a hint of amusement. You're right. It should have taken millennia. It took us 200 years. You want to know the difference? You develop technology in isolation, each species jealously guarding their advances, using them to dominate others. We developed ours while watching you. Every battle you fought, every ship you destroyed, every technological breakthrough you used for war, we observed, we learned, and we asked ourselves a simple question. How can we do better? She paused, letting the words sink in. You built weapons. We built solutions. You created shields to stop attacks. We created technology that made attacks irrelevant. You focused on destruction. We focused on preservation. The irony is that by being so good at war, you taught us how to make war obsolete. As promised, exactly 10 minutes later, systems across all 3 fleets flickered back to life. Engines hummed, weapons charged, shields raised automatically, but not a single ship moved to attack. They had learned in the most humbling way possible that the humans were not to be trifled with. The Stormbringers, through their chaotic psychic network, projected a single emotion toward the Perseverance: respect tinged with fear. They began to withdraw without a word, their ships dissipating back into the cosmic storms from which they had emerged. The Mechanist Collective's response was more formal. Data absorbed. Analysis complete. Human technological superiority confirmed. Recommend immediate diplomatic contact with Terran Union. Hostilities deemed illogical. The geometric ships began to move away in perfect formation, their withdrawal as precise as their attack had been. Regent Zoxian was the last to speak. His pride had taken a mortal blow, but he was not emperor of 1,000 systems by being a fool. Captain Chen, he said, his voice carefully neutral, the Zalathi Empire acknowledges your intervention. We will withdraw, but know that this event will not be forgotten. Chen's response was surprisingly warm. I hope it isn't forgotten, Regent. In fact, I hope it's remembered as the day the galaxy learned that there's a new option besides endless war. We're not here to conquer or dominate. We're here to help. All we ask is that you let us. The Golden Fleet turned with a precision that was more about maintaining dignity than tactical necessity, and began to leave the war zone. Within an hour, the Serpentis zone, which had been a battlefield for 3 centuries, was empty except for the Perseverance and the departing civilian transport. Back on the observation station, Krell turned to his young apprentice. Do you understand what we've just witnessed? Sill's wings fluttered thoughtfully. The arrival of a new superpower? No, Krell corrected gently. The arrival of a new paradigm. For thousands of years, galactic civilization has been based on the principle that might makes right. The strong take from the weak. War is the final arbiter of disputes. The humans have just demonstrated that they have the might to take whatever they want, to dominate everyone, and instead they choose to rescue strangers and send war fleets home unharmed. He turned back to the sensors, watching as the Perseverance began to move toward the edge of the war zone. They're going to change everything, young one, not through conquest but through example. Every species that encounters them will have to ask themselves, if the humans with all their power choose compassion over conquest, what excuse do we have? As the human ship reached the edge of the Serpentis zone, it broadcast one final message on all frequencies. This is the Terran Union vessel Perseverance. We are returning to human space. For any who receive this message, you are not alone. If you need help, call out. We will answer. This is not a threat or a promise. It's simply who we are. The ship vanished into the quantum foam, leaving behind a galaxy forever changed. The 3 great fleets would return to their territories, but the war for the Serpentis zone was effectively over. How could they fight over resources and territory when a single human ship had just demonstrated that such concerns were meaningless in the face of sufficient technological advancement? Within days, diplomatic channels that had been silent for centuries began to buzz with activity. Peace talks were proposed, trade agreements discussed, and always in the background was the question that no one could quite answer. If humans had advanced this far in 200 years, what would they be capable of in another 100? Another 1,000? The answer, though none of them knew it yet, was simple. Whatever humanity became, they would never forget the lesson carved into the heart of every human ship, encoded into the DNA of their entire civilization. Power without compassion was meaningless. Strength without mercy was weakness. And in the vast, cold darkness of space, the most advanced technology any species could develop was the simple willingness to help others. The galaxy had known warriors and conquerors, builders and destroyers, prophets and tyrants. But it had never known a species quite like humanity. A species that had looked at the vast tapestry of galactic civilization, seen all its flaws and failures, and decided to be something better. Not through force or intimidation, but through the simple revolutionary act of choosing kindness when they had every reason to choose otherwise. The age of humanity had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.